So one thing y'all are gonna learn about me is that I'm full of shit. I'm full of shit, and I knew it in the last video when I said that this channel was not gonna turn into a horror movie commentary channel. Yeah, I lied. I knew that this was where we were going. I lied. I will probably mix in some other topics here and there, but horror movies is what I know. And also, it's October. It's Halloween. Hello. It's spooky season, so of course, I'm just in the mood to talk about scary shit. Hi, my name is Madyson. That's Madyson with a Y, and welcome back to my channel, Madyson Yaps. Yay, yay. A channel where I sit here and yap about what I want because it's my world and you're just living in it, or it's my channel and you're just watching it, hopefully. And yes, as of the time I'm recording this, it's October 6th. It's Halloween 6. Oh my goodness, the 6th day of Halloween. That's crazy. Of course, for me, you can't see all my Halloween decorations. I really need to have a bigger space for a better setup to really decorate, but I got my Halloween stuff out and ready to go. I have bloody nails. I have a skull coffee cup here, and I'm ready to shove a pumpkin up my ass. But anyways, when last we met, I did a breakdown of the 2002 Japanese horror film, Ju-on: The Grudge. A staple of my childhood. I was very, very excited to make that video. Go check it out if you haven't watched it. It's an hour-long watch. I put my heart and my soul into it. Very proud of it. But actually, speaking of that real quick, I mentioned in that video I went as Kayako when I was like 9 or 10 for Halloween. I dressed up as Kayako, and I have not been able to find that photo in years. But this past week, my dad texted me a bunch of old family pictures and he found it. So I'll just go ahead and insert that right here. I am so cute. I don't care what anybody says. This little girl knew what she liked and she said, I don't care how weird this is, I'm going for it. Yeah, I was super excited to see this photo again. I'm super bummed that I couldn't put it in the last video, but regardless, go watch that video. But anyway, since then, I have had like a weird craving, if you will, for early 2000s horror films in the realm of like teen screams, but not really teen screams, something like where they're not all that serious, something where you don't have to think too deeply into them. And I love you, Ari Aster, but sometimes I just want to turn off my brain and have a good time. Something in the realm of 13 Ghosts, Ghost Ship, House of Wax, the first 3 Final Destination movies, and only the first 3. They're often remakes. They often get bad reviews. For me, and it's probably because I grew up in the early 2000s, they're just so nostalgic. They're just such a good time. They're so easygoing. You get creeps and scares and sometimes twists, but ultimately they're just a good movie night. They're good Halloween movies. But when I decided to do this video, I had 2 specific movies in mind. The Uninvited, which is actually a remake of a Korean film, I believe, The Tale of Two Sisters, and When a Stranger Calls. I took a poll on my personal Instagram, which by the way, I made the channel in Instagram, so go ahead and follow that link in the description below. But a lot of people actually couldn't decide. It was real neck and neck there. Ultimately, we're going with When a Stranger Calls 2006. This was one of those movies I also loved as a child, and it was just the creepiest thing. Because we've all been home alone. We've all been like super uncomfortable, wondering if somebody's watching us, feeling very vulnerable. And that effect that it had on me has never let up, actually. When a Stranger Calls 2006 is a remake of the 1979 movie of the same name. I've never actually seen that one before, but from what I understand, it's very good. It's a cult classic. You know, it's very popular amongst horror fans. So I will be sure to give it a watch after all of this. Actually, in preparing for this video, I have seen some clips and they were really good. I will have to go back and watch the whole film in its entirety. When a Stranger Calls 2006 was directed by Simon West and starring Camilla Bell as our main character and Tommy Flanagan as our stranger. For the majority of the runtime, those are our only 2 important characters, but we do get some scenes with Tessa Thompson, who is an incredible actress. My favorite film of hers is hands down Mississippi Damned, a very, very bleak movie, a horror film in itself that you actually can't find anywhere on the internet. I tried to rewatch it, can't find it anywhere, can't download it anywhere. Maybe I could pirate it, I'm not doing all that. But if you get the opportunity to watch Mississippi Damned, do, and prepare yourself. The plot of When a Stranger Calls is basically the retelling of the old urban legend. A babysitter home alone watching young children keeps getting calls from an unknown person. They barely say anything, and then they start saying really creepy stuff that insinuates that she's being watched, and he is waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike, to get her. When a Stranger Calls, the original one, of course, and this one, gave us the iconic lines, "The call is coming from inside the house," and "Have you checked the children?" Now, I referenced an urban legend instead of immediately referencing the 1979 movie because that movie was based off of an urban legend called The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs. And that urban legend came about because of an actual crime in 1950. 13-year-old Janet Chrisman was babysitting for the Romax. She was a few days shy of turning 14. Mrs. Romax said that her son would be asleep, so it should be an easy babysitting gig. Later on in the evening, around around 10 p.m. Mrs. Romack calls the house, but no answer, and she assumes that Janet just fell asleep. Around that same time, the local police got a call from a young girl. Her last words were, "Come quick." The Romacks pulled up to their house around 1 a.m. and noticed that the porch light was on. And they told Janet, only turn the porch light on if there is somebody who is knocking at the door so you can identify them. They go through the front door, which was unlocked, and they go inside to see that Janet is laying in a pool of her own blood. She has stab wounds to the face, she has an extension cord around her neck, and the phone is literally feet from her. Their son Gregory was safe in bed, and after an autopsy was done, it was revealed that Janet was strangled to death and sexually assaulted. Now that is a basic outline of the crime. You can find far more information online. I know that there were some issues with like two separate police departments. They didn't want to cooperate with each other on this case. I know that there was a person of interest who was put in jail but then released, and that Janet might have known him. But yeah, it's ultimately unsolved murder. And of course, back in the day, word gets around, the story gets misconstrued, parents are rightfully so concerned about their children, and then an urban legend is born. Now again, I have not seen the 1979 movie, only clips, which I will talk about later because they were very good. But the 2006 version was still very effective on me in childhood. I used to show this movie to friends. I used to just rewatch it for funsies. It leaves you feeling entertained, on the edge of your seat, very unsettled, because we've all been home alone. And a lot of us have been babysitters, alone, in charge of the well-being of young children. In both circumstances, you're hearing creaks and cracks and movement all around the house. Is it real or is it just like the wind? And then imagine you're getting phone calls from an unknown person freaking you out, but you're inside the house, so you're fine, you're safe, you're secure, only to find out a significant amount of time later that he's been in the house with you the whole time. You've been vulnerable the whole time, so now you don't know your next move. You don't know how to operate in this situation. And again, you have children's lives at stake. Me, myself, I'm a gal who loves blissful ignorance. So the scene where our main character realizes that she's been in danger this whole time, Molly, it creates a feeling of shock even though you as the audience have known the whole time, like, she's not safe. The call is coming from inside the house. He's in there with you. He has been in there with you this entire time. And now you're just wondering where he is. When is he gonna get you? Are the kids okay? But anyways, that was a lot of yapping already, but you knew what this was when we got started. Let's go ahead and jump into the actual breakdown of When a Stranger Calls 2006. We open up the scene at a small town carnival. Kids are running around, there's balloons and clowns and all that kind of crap. But contrast to that, overlaying this very joyful and lighthearted scene is an eerie phone call between a girl named Stacy and a stranger. We don't ever see Stacy, but it's clear that she is babysitting at a house near the carnival. We keep getting shots of the carnival, we get shots of some of the community. Creepy music is playing and it's really unsettling to hear all the auditory creepiness, the phone calls. Stacy begs the stranger to stop, and we're hearing this over this fun carnival, which small town carnivals are really fun. So it's an unsettling contrast. The camera pans to the second story of this house that is near the carnival. The music fades out, the credit stops, and we just stopped on this dark window. The light comes on in the window and we see the silhouette of the stranger, a strange man. He attacks whoever turns the light on, Stacy, and we cut back to the carnival and all the fun and all the kids, overlaid by Stacy's blood-curdling scream. The scream is really effective. It's not no little dainty help me scream. It is like brutal. It's a brutal scream. We cut to the next morning. The carnival is being packed up. We see a detective pulling up to a house that is surrounded by people, police cars, and is taped off with crime scene tape. Detective Hines gets out and he's very chill, very easygoing, talking to some of the cops that are already on the scene. One of the officers takes Detective Hines upstairs to the crime scene, which is the children's bedroom. We pass by family photos on the wall and we see that the couple who owned this house had 3 small children, young children. Detective Hines goes and looks in the bedroom and we don't get to see what he's seeing. All we see is his face and the look of pure horror on his face, and that is overlaid by faint echoes, I guess, of the kids screaming. Detective Hines is no longer a good time gal. He has to go downstairs, go outside, and compose himself as several tiny body bags are being taken out that are covered in blood. And I think that is to insinuate that they were ripped apart. That's what I have always taken from that scene. As the officer was leading Detective Hines upstairs, he also mentioned that there was no murder weapon left behind. I think that was meant to insinuate that he did it with his bare hands, but also I just thought, like, couldn't he have taken it with him? Text then comes on the screen over a high school, Fernhill, Colorado, 125 miles away. We're introduced to our main character, Jill Johnson, who is running on an indoor track that is over the school gymnasium. I don't know what kind of budget this school is working with, but I always thought that this was so cool. Probably not practical, but pretty cool. Jill is running her ass off trying to beat her best time when she looks down at one of the basketball players that's on the gymnasium floor, and she gets distracted and does not beat her best time. And her coach is like, we both know that you could beat 24 seconds. And they repeat this mantra, focus on something in the distance and run to it like nothing else exists, which is giving very much foreshadowing. But something does exist, because before Jill walks off to go to the shower, she looks down at that same basketball player, they make eye contact, and she walks away. There's beef. There's beef going on right there. Later on, Jill is at her locker and she attempts to make a phone call on her cell phone, but it says that it's out of service. She rips a picture of her and two of her friends off the back of her cell phone, so obviously beef is there too. When then that same basketball player, Bobby, who looks to be about 30 years old, approaches Jill and she walks away trying to ignore him. They go back and forth, and then Jill goes on to be like, oh, well, we've talked about it a lot already. 80 minutes on Saturday, 120 minutes on Sunday, 300 minutes on whatever. Like, she's trying to convey that she has been spending a lot of time on the phone, using a bunch of minutes, which is probably why her phone is turned off. That's very 2006 of them. They keep arguing a little bit, and from what is discussed, Bobby kissed another girl while he was drunk, or that he didn't kiss her, she kissed him. Scandalous. Jill meets up with Scarlett, Tessa Thompson, in the art room. Scarlett asks Jill if she's going to be going to the homecoming bonfire, which Jill is like, nope, I'm grounded because of my cell phone issues, and I'm being forced to babysit tonight. Their other friend, Tiffany, so now all three girls from the picture are now here. Tiffany comes up and it gets real awkward and silent. Scarlett is like, come on guys, this is so high school. Jill replies, Scarlett, we are in high school, which is so iconic. Tiffany slams down her paint that she was holding and just walks off, which now we know Bobby kissed Tiffany. Later after school, Jill's dad is driving her to the home of the parents she's supposed to be babysitting for. He's trying to make small talk with her, talking about how him and her mom are going to be going on a date. Jill's not having any of it. She's real pissy in the front seat. She said she understood why she got her phone taken away, but she could at least drive herself to where she's babysitting. Like, what do you think, I'm not going to show up? And he says, girl, you used 800 minutes. You were on the phone for 800 minutes. That cost us a fortune. No phone, no car for a month, which is reasonable, I think. I never did the minutes. My first cell phone was an iPhone 4 and I was on a family plan, so I don't know how minutes work at all. But for funsies, let's look it up. Oh my gosh, somebody on Reddit asked like the same question regarding this movie. From what I'm seeing in the responses is that it would vary, but somebody says it could cost hundreds of dollars for 800 minutes. 800 minutes is 13 hours. That is crazy. Girl, he cheated on you. Like, what else is there to talk about? Why do you need to talk about that for 13 hours? So they finally pull up to the Mandrakis' house. It is this big 3-story house on the lake. This house is insane. Starting from the outside, she has to walk through this door that basically leads her to the porch that kind of goes around the exterior over the lake. Like, it's real fancy schmancy. And she is let in the house by Dr. Mandrakis. Dr. Mandrakis' wife Kelly comes down the stairs, is like, hey, I just got both the kids to sleep. They're getting over the flu. Don't wake them, whatever. And she shows Jill around, lets her know that they have a live-in nanny named Rosa. She shows her on the fridge that there's a printed list of numbers to the restaurant they're going to emergency services, her phone number, Rosa's phone number. She also shows Jill that across the way, like kind of across the lake, is a guest house that their eldest son sometimes stops in and stays at. He never makes himself known really, but he may or may not be in there. She reiterates that the kids shouldn't be a problem. They should like literally be asleep the entire time, which they are. For the majority of the runtime, they are not in the movie, which is crazy to me. And let me tell you something right now. This is the most unrealistic part of this movie. When Jill arrives, the sun is like still out. I couldn't tell you what time it was. Maybe it was like 5 or 6 o'clock. But my son, if I tried to put him to bed while the sun was still out, he would laugh in my face. Also, getting over the flu, unless you gave them NyQuil, PM, super strength, no, that's not how that works. But it works out for this movie because I think that the kids being out of the way for the majority of the movie is fine. But there were times where I was like, oh yeah, she is here to babysit. Another thing is that this house is really incredible. There's an aviary in the middle that has like full trees, foliage, birds, an entire koi pond. It's a huge house. They have kind of like a floating stair thing going on. I don't know. I'm not a interior design person, but their house is incredible. What it is not though is lived in by children. There is not a sign of children in this house. There is not a toy in sight. There is not a child's drawing. There's no markers on the walls. I don't know. There's too many pointy parts of this house. There's too many fancy artworks in this house. There's an entire bar downstairs. Like, I don't know. When you have kids, even just one, toys just kind of manifest out of nowhere. There's 2 of these kids. Also, there's a live-in housekeeper, so above my tax bracket. I digress. The couple leaves. Before they do, they give Jill like the home security code. They arm the house and they're gone. Later on, it's dark. Jill is making herself at home. She's messing with like a bunch of remotes in the living room. One turns on the stereo, super loud opera. The other one turns on the fireplace. The kids were undisturbed by it. And then she starts making her way around the house. She goes into the Mandrakis' bedroom. The lights turn on as soon as you walk into the room. That'll be important later. And she goes into their closet, into their bathroom, and she starts putting on Kelly's jewelry, looking at her clothes. As she's doing this, she hears a bang coming from the other room, and she quickly takes all that shit off and goes back into the living room and pretends that she was just reading. When she yells out, asks if anybody's there, asks if it's Dr. Mandrakis, she gets no answer. She sees a light coming from down one of the halls. She walks towards it, really uneasy, when she realizes it's just Rosa in the aviary feeding the birds. Jill goes back to the living room, sits back down, stares at the phone, and starts reaching towards it, contemplating running up the Mandrakis' minutes when the phone rings. She answers it, and all she hears is breathing, and then the line ends, and this is her first call from the stranger. Later on, she's talking on the phone with Scarlett. Scarlett's like, what's the house like? How are the kids? And then she gives her the whole rundown. Scarlett also mentions to Jill that, hey, Bobby was asking for that house number so he could call you. And Jill's like, well, you can give it to him. You know, you don't have to be a good friend and tell him to f off. And Scarlett, rightfully so, is like, girl, what happened to staying strong? Jill changes the subject and they talk a little bit more before getting off the phone. Jill is like, yeah, give him the number. Stupid. And they hang up. After Jill gets off the phone, the security alarm goes off. Jill runs to rearm it and she receives a call from the security company. The security company needs to call Dr. Mandrakis to verify that Jill, she is who she is, and, you know, that gets squared up, whatever. Kelly Mandrakis calls and checks in on Jill, make sure everything's okay, make sure that the kids haven't woken up. Jill says that everything's fine and she thinks that maybe Rosa had set it off. Mrs. Mandrakis suggests that Rosa has done this several times before, so not to worry about it. Jill goes back to the aviary to see if Rosa is there and she's okay, but Rosa is gone, and sitting on a chair in the aviary is a large tub of seeds that Rosa was using earlier, and it's really creepy because like it's not supposed to be there. Like, where is she? Why did she just leave that? It's creepy. The phone rings again, and when Jill picks up, there's a man's voice on the other end asking, is everything okay? Jill replies, Dr. Mandrakis, and the line just goes dead. Jill starts to get creeped out at this point, and I absolutely would be too, because you're surrounded by nothing but wilderness. You didn't see a neighbor coming up here. Like, no houses are nearby. You're on a lake, and there is like 10-foot windows surrounding Jill in the living room where she's at. Absolutely not. That's a recipe for danger if I've ever seen one. Later on, while Jill is studying, she gets another phone call, which at this point is already irritating. Like, I think this is like the 4th call she's gotten, but I'd be so sick of hearing that ringer already. And this is nowhere near the last call she'll be getting. But when she picks it up, it's just a prank call from one of her ex's friends, Cody, I think. Jill is aware that this is just a prank, but even then she still feels pretty uneasy, so she grabs a fireplace poker and goes and walks around the house. Jill hears a noise coming from the kitchen, which turns out just to be the ice maker in the freezer, and she calms down, grabs a popsicle, and goes back to the living living room. The phone rings again and she answers it, and from behind her she hears hello. And it is her ex-friend Tiffany, who was able to get in because the garage door is open. They have kind of a catty exchange going back and forth about, oh, well, Bobby liked me first in the 9th grade, so I had to get my kiss back. Jill's like, oh, well, I'm expecting a call from Bobby, and it's just like, Bobby is not worth all this foolishness. Tiffany even goes on to be like, well, I'm a bitch, and everybody knows that. They really make her seem like an unlikable, untrustworthy person. And for her character, I absolutely agree with that. She's a shitty friend. I would not continue to be friends with her. I would not entertain Bobby. Yes, there are some teenage girls that do behave like this. But my problem for movies of this era, they always typecast a blonde, bitchy, mean teenage girl. It's always the girl who deserves to die, really. And it irritates me so much because I think it gives adults an excuse to just outright hate teenage girls, which they do. I remember in this era, teenage girls being made fun of so much for liking Justin Bieber, for liking Jersey Shore, for liking things that adult men didn't like. And I will never trust a grown-ass adult who outright shits on teenage girls for no reason. But I think Tiffany's character was meant to be hated, and as a character, yeah, she's like a shitty person. So, but I think if they made Tiffany's character remorseful, regretful, hey, I did this, I regret it, I absolutely regret it, I acknowledge it, I'm so sorry, I want to continue to have a strong friendship with you, I think what happens to Tiffany would be a lot sadder. We would care about Tiffany. But no, instead she is the bitchy, provocative alcoholic that the early 2000s just loved to hate. Anyways, Jill tells Tiffany that she needs to leave. Tiffany goes, and as she is walking to her car, she's hearing footsteps behind her. The wind is really winding outside, but she hears intentional footsteps coming behind her. Tiffany, in Blonde Girl in a Horror Movie, another trope that I really can't stand, is struggling to find her keys in her purse. And when she does find them, she drops them and they manage to get all the way under her car. She finally gets in her car and her car won't start. And finally, when it does, as she's backing up, she's noticing that there is a branch that is blocking the gate to get out of the Mandrakis' driveway. And when I say branch, I mean twig. A twig that Tiffany felt the need that she had to get out of her vehicle to move. Just run it over. Your car will be fine, I promise. Once Tiffany gets out of the car to try to move the twig, she is ran up on by the stranger, runs back to the Mandrakis' front door, and there's banging on the door. We actually don't get to see Tiffany banging on the door, but Jill hears the banging, walks to the door, unlocks it, opens it, and there's no one out there. That's a red flag to me. Jill rearms the alarm, goes back to the living room, and she receives another call. She's nervous at first, but then she realizes it's Bobby. She's having a hard time hearing him because he's up at the bonfire and they're in the mountains and it's hard to get a signal up there, but she's asking Bobby, hey, have you been calling me tonight? And he's like, no, but Cody did call you earlier, but he only did it once. And she's begging him to reaffirm that. But before he's able to go and ask, the phone line cuts out. The phone rings again, and this time on the caller ID it says Tiffany Madyson. Jill picks up and she starts to scold Tiffany, I can see you, dumbass, there's caller ID. But a man's voice answers, this isn't Tiffany. Girl, my stomach would fall into my ass. Jill asks the stranger, who is this? He says back, who is this? Sir, if you don't stop playing in my face right now. Jill says, Cody? And he says, who's Cody? Sir, f you and the clique you claim. The stranger hangs up, and of course Jill is freaked the f out. Something bad has happened to Tiffany. Somebody has her phone now, and whatever bad thing happened to Tiffany happened right outside the front door. And also, it's the same guy who's been calling you all night. Now he's calling from Tiffany's phone? Yeah, no. I'd be calling everybody in my contact. Everybody needs to know that I need help, including the police. Which Jill does, first by calling Scarlett, who is at the bonfire, and so there's not a good signal and the line cuts out. Next, she calls her dad, who doesn't answer because he's on a date with her mom. I'd be calling over and over and over, but she does leave him a voicemail. She calls Mrs. Mandrakis, who doesn't pick up. She calls the restaurant that they were supposed to be at, but they have left already to go see a movie. Why is your phone not, the ringer's not on? All of your kids are alone. Jill's alone. The kids are alone with Jill, who's just a teenager. My ringer is gonna need to be on in case the person who's watching my babies calls. But again, these people live in a different tax bracket than I do, so they probably have less fears about what happens in the real world. I'm just saying. Also, Jill doesn't try to call Dr. Mandrakis' phone or her mother's phone, which I don't know why. I would. I don't know. So next she just calls the police and she is connected to an Officer Burrows, and she explains to him, I've been getting creepy calls all night from a guy who doesn't say anything. And he's like, well, we can't really do anything about like a prank call. Now look, in this kind of horror movie situation, I am going to go into very explicit details about exactly what's been happening. Not only have I been getting strange calls all night, but the person who has been calling me just called me from my friend's cell phone who just left this place. She was banging on the door, but when I opened the door, she wasn't there. Something bad has happened to her, and now he has her phone. He is outside the house. Like, let's put the puzzle pieces together, give the cops all the information we have, because no, you have not just been getting strange phone calls all night. I think that even at this early point in the movie, alarms blaring. Anyways, Officer Burrows, he doesn't completely write her off. He does ask her name and understands that there's prank calls, people are assholes, people like to freak out, especially young women. Jill is talking to him, he's calming her down when she realizes that Rosa's car is still parked outside, and she's like, oh, well, I feel stupid now because there's another person in the home with me. And Officer Burrows is sweet. He's like, no, I totally understand, there's a lot of freaks out there. You call me back and ask for me personally if you need me. After she gets off the phone with Officer Burrows, she calls Rosa, and she hears her phone down the hall from her. She finds Rosa's phone in the laundry room along with her purse, her keys, all of her essentials. Jill calls out for Rosa, no response. And for me, this is not a good thing. Her car is here, all of her belongings are here, but she is not here. She is not responding to me. I would immediately call 911 again and be like, hey, I need you to send an officer out here. Something is not right. Jill gets another call, and you want to take a wild guess who it is? The person on the other end of the phone asks,
have you checked the children?
Girl, the first time I saw this absolutely terrified me. You know I'm watching children. You must be outside. You know what I'm doing. You know what's going on here. That's so scary. So Jill hangs up and she does go to check the children. At the top of the stairs where their bedroom is, there is a really creepy statue up there. How do children live in this house? Quickly explain to me. My son would not walk past that thing. Absolutely not. These sadistic ass people must hate their children. Jill checks on the kids, Allison and Will, and they're fine. As Jill is coming downstairs, the phone rings again, and when she answers it, the stranger on the other end says,
how are the children?
oh, it gives me goosebumps. It gives me such goosebumps. It's so creepy. Because now your blissful ignorance is gone. But now you know he can see you. That's certain. She drops the phone, immediately starts closing all the curtains to these 10-foot ass windows. She calls Officer Burrows back and she's like, he can see me. He knows when I went upstairs to check on the kids, he can see me. She says that Rosa's car is still here, but she's not in the house. I can't find her. Again, at this point, I would be clarifying every single thing, every incident that has occurred in this house since I've been in it. Every phone call, my friend Tiffany, she's missing now. Like, she's gone. Her phone is in the hands of this. You know now that this stranger is outside stalking you, and he was making a phone call to you off of your friend's phone, who was banging at the door, who disappeared. Come on, tell him that. I can't stand it in horror movies when people do not reiterate the extreme danger that they are in. They always give these super vague explanations and story details, and it's just like, girl, come on, do you want to be taken seriously or not? The garage door was open. I feel like this is crucial information that Officer Burrows would need to have. Officer Burrows asks if she has an alarm system in the house she is. She says yes. He says, okay, then you're safe inside the house, which we know that she's not. He said he can make a call to the phone company and have them put a trace on the phone line, and when the stranger calls back, they can trace the phone call so long as he's kept on the phone for 60 seconds or more. Realistically, I don't think a police agency would do this. I have no evidence suggesting otherwise, and I'm not gonna go look it up. I'm not. But it seems to me, especially in 2006, that this would not be an easy feat, and I don't know necessarily if there would be the urgency to do this. The portrayal of Officer Burrows is very kind and compassionate and sweet, and he clearly cares about Jill's safety, but I don't think that's realistic. And maybe it's just me. I live in Dallas, Texas, where if you call the police, they might give you a call back in 2 to 3 business days. But let's just stick to what's happening in the movie. In the meantime, he can send out an officer to go wait with her, but it'll take like 20 minutes. So until then, she's just gonna have to hang tight and hopefully be able to get him to stay on the phone for more than 60 seconds. The phone rings and it's him, and she tries to engage with him, but she's only able to keep him on the phone for 50 seconds. She looks out the window, and across the way she sees the guest house, and she sees that a light has been turned on in the guest house. There's a phone number on the fridge for the guest house, so she goes ahead and calls, but she gets no answer. She's leaving a voicemail, and this is 2006, so I'm pretty sure that it's on an answering machine, and whoever is in the guest house house can hear it, and she sees a figure glide past the window. This part creeped me out as a kid. I thought I thought it was so creepy and so ominous. So there is definitely somebody in there. They're definitely hearing the voicemail that you are leaving, letting them know like, hey, I'm the babysitter. I'm here. I've been getting weird calls all night. I had to call the police, and they're not picking up. So for me, that is a pretty good indication that whoever is in there is the person that has been harassing you all night. At this point, I feel like Jill is a dumbass. She decides that she's going to go to the guest house. She decides she's going to leave 2 young children in this big ass house alone while she knows that there is somebody outside definitely actively watching her at night in the dark across the way. It's just foolishness. But don't worry, y'all. She brings a heavy candlestick, so she's good. She makes her way to the guest house and she goes inside, and shockingly nobody is there. The guest house phone rings and it is the stranger, and she is able to keep him on the line for more than 60 seconds. However, she realizes that he called the wrong phone line, so it doesn't even matter. Jill looks out the window to the main house and she sees that a light upstairs has been turned on, and under her breath she says, Rosa. Girl, you know damn well that that's not Rosa. God. Jill sprints back to the house. I guess this was the foreshadowing, focus on something in the distance and run to it like nothing else exists. She's not running from anything, but I guess this is the only callback to her being a track runner in the movie. Jill gets back to the house, rearms the alarm, and she's pretty confident that Rosa is in the house. She goes upstairs and she's calling Rosa's name the whole time, and she's making her way all the way up to the 3rd floor where Rosa's room is. While going upstairs, she receives a call from the stranger. Jill keeps him on the line as she's making her way upstairs, and she's asking him like, what do you want? Why are you calling me? You know, if you did want to scare me, you've done it. You know, the police are gonna drive me home, whatever. And as she makes her way into Rosa's room, where she can hear from Rosa's bathroom that the shower is running, she asks the stranger, if you're not trying to scare me, then what do you want? And he replies,
You have blood all over me.
and disgustedly she hangs up. She goes into Rosa's bathroom. Rosa is clearly not in there because she's been saying her name the whole time. No response. She pulls back the curtain and sees that there's nobody in the shower. The shower's just running. She turns off the shower and the phone rings again, and Jill starts yelling, you know, stop calling me, but it's Officer Burroughs. We get the iconic line,
We traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. You hear me? It's coming from inside the house.
oh, again, just goosebumps. It's just so scary. At that moment, the power in the house completely goes out, and Jill hears a phone ringing behind her. She turns around to see the body of her friend Tiffany lying on the ground lifeless, with her cell phone ringing in front of her face and illuminating her face. Jill very slowly and very carefully makes her way downstairs because now she knows that he's in the house. She almost went completely downstairs when she realizes, oh, yeah, I gotta get the kids because if not, then they will be murdered. She goes and checks on the kids, and they are not in their beds. Her attention turns to a toy box that is in a connected room. It looks like a separate craft room in their bedroom. And she sees that there's a toy sticking out of the toy box, and she slowly makes her way towards it like she's not prepared to find whatever she's about to find in there, but it's just, girl, it's just a toy. Like, I would assume that there was toys in the toy box. But she opens the toy box and the kids are both in there, covering their mouths, hiding. She lets them know that she's the babysitter and that they gotta get the hell out of there right now. Suddenly, the power comes back on. Jill and the kids are making their way out of the craft room when Jill notices that there is now a dresser in front of the door. Jill is quickly panicked, which yes, one would be, and she begins to look around and sees the silhouette of the stranger in the rafters above the kid's bed. What I want to know is how this guy was so stealthy and so quick that he was able, while she was in that other room for 30 seconds getting the kids, able to take the dresser, which was across the room. I had to go back to the beginning of the movie the first time she went into the kids' room to double check. The dresser was across the room. He moves it in front of the door and makes his way up into the rafters in 30 seconds. Like, this is not a regular homicidal maniac. This man was experimented on by the CIA, and now he's doing all kinds of crazy acrobats and shit. Jill pushes the kids back into the craft room, barricades the door, and she realizes that in this room there is a window that leads out into the aviary. So she tells the kids to crawl out of the window. They make their way down a tree into the aviary. I don't understand why these windows would be able to open up. Like, these are young kids. I wouldn't want my kids to be able to crawl into and fall down into our aviary or let birds into the whatever. It works right here. The stranger, of course, is trying to break down the door, but Jill herself is able to get out of the window into the aviary. All finally in there, they see that lights are coming on. They're automatic lights, remember, that they turn on when you enter the room. They see that lights are coming on upstairs, making their way to the stairs. Coming down the stairs is the family cat. But they back into a window, and of course, on the other side is the stranger. Again, he's stealthy. He is an acrobat. He is a phantom. Jill then has the idea to turn on the misters in the aviary, and that way she and the kids would be able to like hide without being seen. I don't feel like this would work in real life. Like, it's not going to be so misty that he's not going to be able to see you through the glass, but that's what they did. Jill hides the kids in some shrubbery, and she gets into the koi pond and like hides under this little walkway thing. The stranger comes in. He's looking around everywhere. He walks onto the bridge that Jill's underneath, and she makes her way under the water where she finds Rosa's dead body. She doesn't scream. She doesn't panic. She comes back up. She motions to the kids to get out, and they were able to almost make their way out when the misters went off and one of the kids stepped on a twig and it got the stranger's attention, and they just booked it out of there. And the kids are trying to unlock the door, but earlier Jill locks the top lock that's like at the very top of this tall door so the kids can't reach it. Just then the stranger finds Jill. He's like trying to reach for her under the bridge. She gets away. Jill's able to get out of the aviary, but as she is trying to like close the door to it, the stranger grabs her hair, so he's grabbing onto her hair. Her hair is caught in the door. She rips away and he takes like a huge chunk of her hair. My problem with this scene though is, while I'm obviously glad that Jill got away, but this man was able to move a dresser and hide in some rafters within 30 seconds. He was able to quietly murder 2 women and hide their bodies in the house. He was able to run from the guest house to the main house to the main house of the guest house super quickly, super quietly, and effectively. And of course Jill had to fight to survive, but it's just weird to me that he was unable to get her out of the water. And also the door scene, he wasn't able to just push that door open and get her. I don't know, it just felt very inconsistent that he's able to do all these superhuman things, but Jill was able to get away. Spoiler, she lives. I don't know, maybe after the first 2 murders he was tuckered out. Anyway, he's trapped in the aviary, but the kids took off and went to hide, and Jill's running all over the house looking for them. She's screaming their name the entire time, and they're just not responding. They're babies. They're probably traumatized and scared. As Jill is looking everywhere for the kids, she sees a bird on the staircase, and that's when she notices a bunch of other birds, and that's when she notices that one of the windows to the aviary has been broken and the stranger is out and loose, and the cat is eating one of the birds. That was really creepy and unnecessary, but it worked. I don't know, I liked it in this movie. And instead of getting Jill, he just kind of walks off to go be creepy and menacing. I digress. He could have just got her right here, but he was really loving this game. She finds the kids hiding in the fireplace, and she is able to get them out the front door. As she is trying to get out the front door herself, the stranger reappears, pushes her back, and locks the front door. She attempts to run away. She attempts to run upstairs, which, by the way, that's horror 101. You don't run upstairs because it's much harder to get out of the house from upstairs than it is from downstairs. They have a tussle on the stairs. They eventually both end up falling off and falling onto the floor. He gets her in front of the fireplace and he starts choking her. While he is choking her, she's able to grab a bottle of tequila that Tiffany actually left out when she was over there earlier. She throws it at the fireplace and manages to get the remote that turns on the fireplace flames. And when she turns it on, the flames scare the stranger and he gets off of her. In this time, she is able to grab the fireplace poker and stab him through the hand and run out of the house, where she runs right into the arms of Detective Burrows. I always forget in this movie, Detective Burrows is played by David Denman, who you might recognize from The Office as Roy. Later on, we see that there are now police and ambulance at the house. The Mandrakis came home and are embracing their children. Jill presumably has been checked out by the ambulance and is waiting probably to go to the hospital. Officer Burrows attempts to comfort Jill and reassure her that he has been sedated. He has handcuffs, ankle cuffs. He is going to be watched by officers around the clock, but Jill just says it's not enough. Just then, the police car containing the stranger drives past Jill, and we finally get to see his face, which I don't understand why they wouldn't wait until she was gone. I would not want this man to make eye contact with this young woman ever again. I mean, she might have to see him in court one day, but other than that, no, not in this moment. Tommy Flanagan, who plays the stranger, you might recognize him from Sons of Anarchy, but he has the these scars along his mouth, and I always thought that that was for the movie. I thought this was makeup, but actually it turns out he got these scars in Glasgow, Ireland in a bar fight. For Sons of Anarchy and for this movie are both very effective. You get to kind of make up your own backstory about who the stranger is and how he got these scars. As the police are taking him away, you hear voiceovers from several different news stations talking about a mass murderer who's murdered over 15 people, has finally been apprehended. His MO is unclear, but he does stalk and harass young women and children and brutally murders them. They emphasize that his identity is unknown. However, this differs from the 1979 When a Stranger Calls, because I do believe you do know exactly who the stranger is in that one, but that one is not this one. I digress. We fade into our final scene where Jill is in the hospital sleeping, and she is awoken by the sound of a popping balloon. She calls for a nurse but gets no answer. She walks out into this wing of the hospital and there is no one there. And there is nothing creepier than an empty hospital. Back in her hospital room, she hears a phone ringing. She goes in and just stares at the phone until it stops ringing. She turns around to close her door, and in the mirror on the back of the door, she sees the stranger and he lunges at her before she wakes up screaming. Nurses and her father are trying to calm her down, but she just keeps yelling, "He's in the house, he's in the house, you're not listening to me, he's in the house." The movie ends with the camera leaving Jill's room, going down the hall. We see doctors running into her room, nurses and staff looking and talking amongst themselves as the movie ends, insinuating that Jill is going to have to live with the trauma of this experience, this post-traumatic stress disorder, for the rest of her life and probably never feel safe again. And that is When a Stranger Calls, 2006. I really hope people appreciate these videos that I do, because when you are researching for these videos and looking at these movies with objectivity, they do seem kind of silly. Like, don't get me wrong, I love this movie. I don't care about the plot holes. It's a good time, girl. It's a good time, girl. But there are some things that you're just like, why are we doing this? This situation could have been wrapped up in 20 minutes if we just made better decisions. With that being said, I think that this movie is simple but very effective. I think 95% of the runtime you don't see the stranger, and yet he is always there. You don't know when he got there, you don't know what he has been doing this whole time, but that's the part that's so creepy. It's what we can't see that is the scariest. Even going back to the first scene when Detective Hines is looking at the murder scene and we as the audience are not shown, I think that that is such an effective tool to use in horror films, because we don't always need to see. I think our imaginations are dark and twisted enough, and we can conjure up horrible images that you can't really see on screen. Now, I did do a little bit of research when writing up the script for this video. I was curious to see some scenes from the 1979 movie, specifically the iconic, the call is coming from inside the house. I wanted to talk about it here a little bit just because the scene was good. Also, what I learned is that When a Stranger Calls 2006 is not an exact remake of the 1979 movie. In the 1979 movie, our main character is Jill Johnson, and she is babysitting for the Mandrakeses, and she has been getting strange calls all night. There's a lot of similar interactions and a lot of similar things that happen in this movie and in the 2006 movie. However, in this one, when Jill realizes that the call is coming from inside the house, the stranger comes out of the children's bedroom, and Jill runs out of the house. And we transition into Officer Burroughs' face. I think that's his name here. I actually don't know. But the scene transitions into an officer's face, and it fades out, and we got police cars and police inside the house. As it turns out, the stranger came out covered in blood, not his own, and the children had been dead for several hours before, which is really dark because it really is very not nonchalant. I wasn't expecting that. And that really is just the beginning part of the film. The stranger gets sent to like a psychiatric ward, and Jill grows up, has a family of her own, and then the stranger gets out and comes looking for revenge. Obviously, is not where this movie goes, but I think it's safe to say, and I don't think that they're ever going to do a sequel, but I think it's safe to say that that is probably the same fate that Jill is going to meet. The stranger will get out and come looking for revenge. The vibe that I got from the stranger in the 2006 movie is that he was in prison before and he did escape, because from the initial murder from the beginning of the film, he ran 125 miles to a different town. So that just gives gives like escaped convict. But I'm glad that the 2006 just kept it like a basic babysitting movie. It took place all in one night. And that's what I really like about movies like this from the early 2000s. They're just simple. They're simple, effective. They're good time girls. I don't always want to have to rewatch movies for Easter eggs and symbolism. I don't always want to watch new concept horror. Just a no pressure, no strings attached horror film. But that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please go back and watch my Ju-on the Grudge video. And also don't forget to like and subscribe and leave comments down below if you have any suggestions for any movies you want me to watch, break down, and yap about. Until next time, bye!